So things like that will change, and how we are part of the support for the monarchy may change slightly. Who knows?
Princess Anne just stood shoulder to shoulder with Prince William to deliver a historic verdict that has left Queen Camilla completely isolated inside the monarchy. The confrontation took place in the formal drawing room at Sandringham, where the Queen Consort expected a standard family dinner. Instead, she found the two highest-ranking royals waiting with a signed decree that strips her faction of all remaining palace influence. There were no raised voices, just a cold presentation of facts that caught Camilla completely off guard. The institutional hammer has officially dropped, and Camilla stands entirely alone. A sudden detour to Sandringham. The black royal saloon car moved smoothly past the sign for the main Norfolk highway. Inside the rear cabin, Queen Camilla looked at her watch. It was exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She expected to see the familiar lights of the London outskirts within the hour. Instead, the vehicle slowed down significantly and tipped its indicator to the left. The driver turned the heavy car onto a narrow, tree-lined country road that led directly away from the city. Camilla leaned forward and tapped the glass partition separating her from the front seat. The driver did not lower the glass completely. He simply spoke through the small intercom system. He informed the Queen that a sudden security directive had come through the Central Police Dispatch Terminal 5 minutes ago. The main highway ahead was blocked due to an unspecified security incident near the county line. The Royal Protection Team had been ordered to reroute her convoy immediately. Camilla looked out the side window. The landscape was flat, gray, and dominated by the vast pine woods of the Sandringham estate. Her personal private secretary sat next to her, quickly typing on a secure digital tablet. The screen flickered as the network signal began to drop near the thick trees. The secretary looked up, her expression visibly strained. She noted that her official palace itinerary had not updated to reflect this change. Usually, any detour is logged across 3 independent security platforms simultaneously. Tonight, the digital log remained completely blank. The absence of an official update created an immediate, heavy silence inside the car. The convoy did not use the public visitor entrance to the estate. The lead escort vehicle pulled up to the rear forestry gate, a massive iron structure that usually stays locked throughout the winter months. A lone guard stood by the control box, wearing a heavy wax jacket instead of the standard ceremonial uniform. He did not ask for identification or check the vehicle logs. He simply pressed the remote button and stepped back into the shadows as the 3 cars moved onto the private gravel tracks. The tires crunched loudly against the stones as the saloon car stopped outside the side entrance of Sandringham House. This particular door entered directly into the lower domestic quarters, bypasses the main formal hallways entirely. Camilla did not wait for the footman to open her door this time. She stepped out into the cold afternoon air, her eyes scanning the windows of the upper floor. The curtains were drawn across the king's private medical suite, but several lights were burning brightly in the long gallery downstairs. The domestic staff inside the entrance hall stood in a rigid, silent line. They did not bow or offer the usual vocal greetings as the Queen walked past. A senior house steward stood near the cloakroom, holding a single silver tray. On the tray sat a small, typed slip of paper bearing the official blue crest of the Prince of Wales. Camilla picked up the note. It contained less than 10 words, instructing her to proceed directly to the small morning room at the end of the corridor. Her private secretary moved to follow her, but a tall security officer stepped into the hallway, blocking the path with a firm, polite gesture. He told the secretary that her presence was required in the lower administration office to verify the evening's security logs. The separation was swift, professional, and entirely non-negotiable. Camilla was left to walk down the long, carpeted corridor completely alone. The only sound was the steady hum of the central heating pipes behind the old oak skirting boards. The door to the morning room was slightly ajar. A single lamp burned on the side table, casting a warm orange glow across the green velvet armchairs. Camilla pushed the door open and stepped inside, expecting to find a junior courtier waiting with an apology from the government liaison team. Instead, she found the room entirely prepared for a formal institutional meeting. A massive oak desk had been moved from the library and placed directly in front of the windows, completely changing the layout of the space. Prince William stood near the fireplace, his back to the room, as he studied a small oil painting of the estate's grounds. He did not turn around immediately when the door clicked shut. He wore a simple dark suit, completely devoid of any official pins or royal decorations. His posture was completely straight, his hands clasped firmly behind his back. The lack of movement from the prince added a distinct layer of physical tension to the small room, contrasting sharply with the hurried nature of Camilla's arrival. Sitting directly behind the oak desk was Princess Anne. She held a thick leather-bound folder in her hands, her eyes fixed on a specific document printed on heavy cream paper. This was not the standard administrative behavior of a family visit. Anne represented the absolute core of the palace's traditional hierarchy, and her presence alongside the heir apparent indicated that the decision-making process had officially shifted away from the London offices. She did not offer a formal greeting to her sister-in-law. Camilla walked toward the center of the room, her handbag gripped tightly in her left hand. She asked why her travel plans had been disrupted without her personal team's knowledge. Her voice was steady, but it carried a sharp, demanding edge. She stated that she had a scheduled meeting with the Lord Chancellor in London at 6 o'clock, and that this unannounced detour was causing a major logistical problem for her staff. She demanded an immediate explanation for the security lockdown. William turned around slowly, stepping away from the fireplace. He did not offer an apology or a detailed explanation regarding the highway security report. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black USB flash drive, placing it flat onto the center of the oak desk. He looked directly at Camilla and told her that her meeting in London had already been canceled by his office 3 hours ago. The cancellation had been processed through the official government registry, completely bypassing her personal staff. The flash drive sat between them on the polished wood, its small red indicator light blinking slowly in the dim room. Camilla looked at the device, then looked at Princess Anne, who remained completely still behind the desk. The mystery of the sudden diversion was gone, replaced by a much more immediate problem. The Prince of Wales had not just intercepted her travel, he had systematically isolated her from her official network before she even realized her car had changed direction. The Princess Royal takes her position. Princess Anne opened the leather-bound folder with a deliberate, heavy movement. The thick cream paper rattled slightly in the quiet room. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a pair of reading glasses, and slipped them on without looking up. Her eyes fixed instantly on a specific paragraph at the bottom of the first page. This was the exact handwritten letter Queen Camilla had sent to Sandringham earlier that week using a private driver. The blue ink was unmistakable under the lamplight. Camilla took 2 steps closer to the desk, her fingers tightening around the strap of her leather handbag. She demanded to know how that specific correspondence had ended up in the hands of the Princess Royal. The letter was an explicitly private message intended solely for the king's personal desk. It was never meant to pass through the central registry or the family routing offices. The fact that it was sitting on this desk meant her private delivery method had failed completely. Anne did not answer the question directly. She turned the page over, exposing a secondary document attached to the back with a heavy steel paperclip. This secondary paper was a printed digital log from the Duchy of Lancaster financial database. It listed a series of unauthorized account reallocations initiated by Camilla's private treasury advisors over the previous 72 hours. The numbers were laid out in stark, black and white columns, detailing a plan to shift emergency estate funding into a private trust. William stepped up to the edge of the desk, standing directly beside his aunt. He told Camilla that the private driver she trusted had not betrayed her. The driver had simply followed standard security protocols when crossing estate lines. Every single non-vetted item entering the Sandringham perimeter is automatically scanned and logged by the digital branch of the Metropolitan Police Protection Unit. The system had flagged the letter immediately due to the lack of an official palace tracking barcode. The mystery of the intercepted mail was solved, but a much larger complication took its place. Anne looked up from the desk, her expression completely flat and unyielding. She told the Queen Consort that this financial restructuring document constituted a direct breach of the 1993 Royal Trust Agreements. Those specific rules explicitly state that no consort can modify estate assets or funding allocations without the unanimous consent of the permanent trustees. Anne and William made up the absolute majority of those trustees. The tension in the room solidified as the legal facts were laid bare. Camilla argued that the funding shift was a temporary measure designed to protect the household's immediate operating liquidity during a prolonged medical absence. She insisted that her advisors were acting entirely within their administrative rights to ensure the daily bills were paid without delay. Her tone was sharp, defensive, and delivered with a steady stare directed straight at Princess Anne. Anne closed the folder with a sharp thud that caused the small silver inkwell on the desk to rattle. She stood up from her high-backed chair, matching the Queen's posture across the wide oak table. She told Camilla that the operational liquidity of the monarchy was already fully secured by the Treasury solicitor. There was absolutely no legal or practical need for a shadow trust to be established in the middle of the week without a formal council meeting. The Princess Royal then reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a fresh, unsealed envelope bearing the heavy gold seal of the Privy Council. She slid it across the polished wood until it rested directly in front of Camilla's hands. This new document contained the first official draft of a structural royal decree. It was a formal, legally binding verdict compiled by the family's senior legal advisors over the last 48 hours, specifically designed to address this exact breach of trust. Camilla did not reach for the envelope immediately. She looked at the gold seal, recognizing the specific legal weight it carried. This was not a minor family reprimand or a private disagreement about palace logistics. A Privy Council decree is the highest form of administrative mandate within the state apparatus. If this document was fully executed, her ability to manage any portion of the royal estates would be permanently terminated before the end of the day. William watched her reaction closely, his arms crossed over his chest. He stated that the decree had already been reviewed by the Attorney General for England and Wales. The government had confirmed that the trustees possessed full legal authority to enforce these specific restrictions if an unauthorized financial reallocation was detected. The trap was not just logistical, it was a total, airtight legal enclosure that left the Queen Consort with absolutely no room to maneuver or appeal to outside officials. The room grew noticeably colder as the clock on the wall struck 4:30. Camilla realized that her entire inner circle of advisors had been completely outmaneuvered by the speed of the bloodline's response. They had not waited for her to complete the financial transfers. They had used the mere attempt to initiate them as the definitive trigger to strip her of her remaining palace influence. The alliance between the heir apparent and the Princess Royal had effectively closed the gate. Reading the fine print of a royal eviction. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner of the morning room was the only sound for several seconds. Queen Camilla reached out and picked up the unsealed envelope from the polished wood of the desk. Her fingers were steady, but the thick paper rustled slightly as she pulled out the single sheet of official parchment. At the top of the page, the heavy scarlet ink of the Privy Council stamp sat directly next to the dark blue emblem of the Duchy of Cornwall. This was an unprecedented combination of administrative seals, representing both the sovereign state apparatus and the private wealth of the heir apparent. Camilla scanned the opening lines of the text. She did not read the document out loud, but her eyes narrowed as she reached the central clauses. The language was entirely devoid of legal ambiguity or polite diplomatic phrasing. It was written as a direct, sweeping executive mandate. The first clause stated clearly that all operational funding previously allocated to the Queen Consort's personal household for estate management was suspended indefinitely. The text cited the specific regulatory codes of the 1993 trust agreements, turning her recent financial maneuvers into the exact legal justification for her own fiscal isolation. William stepped closer to the desk, his shadow falling across the document in Camilla's hands. He told her that, from this moment on, her office's operational budget was reduced to zero for any activity outside purely ceremonial appearances. He explained that all administrative invoices, staff salaries, and travel logistics for her personal team would now have to be submitted directly to his own Treasury office at Kensington Palace for individual review and approval. The statement was delivered with a flat, cold conviction that left absolutely no room for negotiation or compromise. Camilla set the paper back down onto the desk, her palm flat against the text. She looked directly at Prince William and stated that this document was an insult to the king's sovereign authority. She argued that the Prince of Wales did not possess the constitutional right to strip a reigning queen consort of her administrative budget without an explicit signed warrant from the monarch himself. She maintained that the document in her hands was a complete overreach of his traditional powers as the heir apparent. Princess Anne leaned forward, resting her forearms on the edge of the large desk. Her voice was quiet, sharp, and entirely authoritative as she broke the standoff. She told Camilla that the king had already been fully briefed on the financial database logs by his personal medical counsel early that morning. The facts were entirely straightforward. Because the unauthorized funds transfer had been flagged within the Duchy of Lancaster system, the legal right to intervene reverted automatically to the permanent family trustees, completely bypassing the need for a direct sovereign warrant. Anne then pointed to the very bottom of the parchment, where a second, smaller clause was printed in tight black lettering. This particular section carried a massive, hidden condition that directly targeted Camilla's future structural role within the institution. The clause stipulated that if the king's current medical timeline accelerated or required a formal transition of duties, the Queen Consort's official residence would be legally restricted to a specific private crown estate in the north of Scotland, completely removing her from the London centre of power and the daily operational decision-making at Buckingham Palace. The depth of the isolation was staggering. Camilla looked from Princess Anne back to Prince William, realizing the true scope of the alliance standing across from her. This was not a sudden emotional reaction to a late-night argument. It was a deeply coordinated, permanent institutional purge. The mystery of how the bloodline royals had managed to secure such rapid governmental compliance began to surface. A document of this magnitude, bearing the official Privy Council stamp, could not have been processed through the Whitehall offices without high-level political backing. William resolved the unspoken question immediately. He stated that he had personally held a secure, private meeting with the Prime Minister at Downing Street just 4 hours before her convoy was diverted to Sandringham. The facts presented to the head of the government were completely undeniable. William had shown the Prime Minister the exact digital footprint of the shadow trust Camilla's advisors had attempted to establish. To protect the financial stability of the state and prevent any public perception of constitutional panic, the Prime Minister had given his explicit written assurance that the government would not interfere with the trustees' verdict. The legal enclosure was entirely airtight. Camilla realized that every single avenue of appeal had been systematically blocked before she even stepped into her saloon car that afternoon. She could not appeal to the government, she could not access the palace treasury, and her own operational funds were now entirely under the direct control of her stepson's office. The strategic dominance she had spent 20 years meticulously constructing inside the royal household had been thoroughly dismantled by a single sheet of parchment. The Prince of Wales reached down, picked up the document from under Camilla's hand, and slid it back into the leather-bound folder. He told her that her signature was not required on the text for the mandate to take immediate effect. The signatures of the majority trustees and the registration with the Privy Council office were already complete. The historic verdict was no longer a proposal. It was a fixed, legally binding reality that would govern her entire existence within the House of Windsor from this hour forward. The staff receives their new orders. A sudden sharp rap on the mahogany door broke the tense silence inside the morning room. Prince William gave a brief, clear command to enter. The door swung open fully, and 2 senior royal security officers stepped over the threshold. They wore the dark formal suits of the elite diplomatic protection group, their expressions entirely neutral and professional. They did not look at Queen Camilla or Princess Anne. They marched straight to the side table where Camilla's personal private secretary had left her leather briefcase earlier in the afternoon. The senior officer did not hesitate. He picked up the secure digital tablet and the 2 official communication devices resting on top of the leather folder. Camilla stepped forward, her voice rising slightly as she demanded to know under whose authority they were removing her office's equipment. The officer paused for a fraction of a second, keeping his arms straight at his sides. He informed the Queen Consort that he was acting under a direct administrative warrant issued by the master of the household at 6 o'clock that morning. The logistical breakdown of Camilla's network was happening in real time. While the officers secured the physical devices in the morning room, a much larger bureaucratic purge was taking place in the basement administration offices of Sandringham House. 3 of Camilla's personal private secretaries were currently sitting in the lower conference room, completely surrounded by IT security technicians. The technicians were systematically disabling every single user profile and network login linked to the Queen Consort's London branch. The removal of these digital permissions was absolute. Within 5 minutes, Camilla's staff lost all access to the secure palace intranet. the encrypted royal messaging systems, and the shared scheduling databases. They could no longer see the upcoming royal calendars, nor could they send official correspondence to external government departments. The administrative apparatus that allowed Camilla to issue independent directives had been completely dismantled before the security officers even left the morning room with her devices. A distinct mystery began to circulate among the junior domestic staff who watched the purge unfold from the corridors. A technological lockdown of this magnitude required highly specific master-level encryption keys that were only known to a tiny handful of people inside the royal household. It was virtually impossible for William's IT team to crack the private clearance house network so quickly without an inside informant providing the direct access codes. The identity of the mole within Camilla's camp remained completely hidden. Princess Anne resolved the internal question with cold, factual precision as she adjusted the papers on the desk. She looked directly at Camilla and stated that her long-serving logistics coordinator had fully cooperated with the transition team earlier that morning. The facts were entirely straightforward. Faced with the undeniable digital evidence of the unauthorized Shadow Trust, the coordinator had chosen immediate professional survival over blind institutional loyalty, handing over the network encryption keys to William's security detail. With the technological lockdown fully implemented, the security officers placed the confiscated devices into a tamper-evident canvas bag with a heavy digital lock. The senior officer informed Camilla that all future telecommunications for her personal household would be routed through a temporary monitored switchboard based entirely within the Kensington Palace operations room. Her staff would no longer possess the ability to make unvetted calls to outside legal firms or political contacts. The finality of the orders hit the room like a physical blow. The Queen Consort stood entirely isolated, her physical tools of communication gone, her closest advisors silenced in the basement, and her network completely compromised from within. The bureaucratic efficiency of the purge had left absolutely no loose ends. The Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal had not just delivered a historic verdict, they had immediately stripped her of the actual physical means to resist it. Walking through a silent house. The click of the secure canvas bag being sealed sounded incredibly loud in the absolute quiet of the morning room. Queen Camilla did not look at the security officers as they marched out of the room, their heavy boots echoing down the carpeted hallway. She stood entirely rigid, her eyes fixed on the heavy oak door that led toward the king's private medical wing. She turned away from the desk, ignoring both Prince William and Princess Anne, and walked straight toward that internal exit. She intended to take her case directly to the sovereign, bypassing the legal blockades entirely. Her hand reached out for the antique brass handle, but before her fingers could make contact, the door opened from the other side. Princess Anne did not look back at the desk. She had anticipated the move with perfect accuracy. With a swift, deliberate stride, the Princess Royal stepped directly into the frame of the doorway, her arms straight at her sides, her tall posture completely blocking the narrow entrance to the private corridor. She did not offer a polite excuse or a soft explanation. She stood as a physical barrier between the Queen Consort and the reigning monarch. Camilla stopped less than a foot away from her sister-in-law. Her voice was ice cold as she commanded Anne to step aside immediately. She stated that as the king's wife, she possessed an absolute, unrestricted right to see her husband without being subjected to a physical blockade by his own relatives. She maintained that the king would never tolerate this level of insolence toward her if he knew what was happening in the lower rooms of his own house. Anne did not move an inch. Her expression remained entirely unyielding as she delivered a flat, final refusal. She told Camilla that the king's primary medical team had issued a strict, non-negotiable health directive at 5 o'clock that morning. The facts were completely clear. Due to the high risk of infection and the extreme physical exhaustion following his latest treatment phase, the doctors had ordered a complete 24-hour isolation window from all non-essential personnel. The Prince of Wales, as the official Regency guardian, had already signed the enforcement order. The realization of her complete exclusion settled over the hallway like a heavy fog. Camilla looked past Anne's shoulder into the long, dark corridor beyond the door. The usual bustling presence of the king's personal valets, pages, and medical staff was entirely absent. The long gallery was completely dark, the heavy curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sky. It was a silent house, and for the first time in 20 years, that silence was working entirely against her. She was being locked out of the very center of power she had sought to manage. A deep mystery remained regarding the absolute obedience of the Sandringham domestic staff during this fast-moving purge. Usually, the old guard palace servants maintain a fierce, quiet loyalty to the queen consort, often alerting her to any sudden shifts in family dynamics or unauthorized arrivals on the estate. Yet, from the moment her convoy had been diverted at 4 o'clock, not a single butler, footman, or housekeeper had attempted to drop a hint or send a warning to her personal staff. They had acted like absolute strangers. William resolved the mystery from across the room, his voice calm and completely steady. He explained that every single senior member of the Sandringham domestic team had been formally re-sworn under a new, high-level non-disclosure agreement administered by the Duchy of Cornwall Legal Counsel 2 days prior. The terms were absolute. Any staff member who leaked or discussed internal family logistics with any outside office, including the Queen's London staff, would face immediate, dishonorable dismissal and the total forfeiture of their official palace pensions. The financial lever had worked with brutal efficiency. Faced with the choice between protecting a fading political faction or securing their own long-term financial survival, the domestic staff had chosen the bloodline without a single moment of hesitation. They had quietly stepped back into the shadows, refusing to make eye contact with Camilla as she walked through the corridors, effectively sealing her isolation from within her own domestic environment. Camilla stepped back from the doorway, her fingers clenching into tight fists at her sides. She looked at Princess Anne, then turned her gaze back to Prince William. She realized that the Silent House was a physical manifestation of her new reality within the monarchy. The traditional hierarchy had not just closed the doors, they had completely emptied the space around her, leaving her to stand entirely alone in a cold, gray corridor, stripped of her network, her keys, and her access to the crown. A monarchy reclaimed by the bloodline. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the thick winter darkness had completely settled over the Sandringham estate. Inside the main guard room, located just past the secure archway of the Royal Mews, the atmosphere was quiet but intensely focused. A senior sergeant of the Loyalty Protection Group walked over to the central green baize notice board. He held a single sheet of heavy parchment, freshly laminated and carrying the official dual stamps of the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal. With 2 deliberate taps of a hammer, he pinned the document directly to the center of the wooden frame. This was the official operational directive that cemented the day's historic verdict. It was not a temporary emergency measure. It was a permanent, structural restructuring of the palace hierarchy. The text laid out the new terms of command with absolute clarity. From this hour forward, all decisions regarding the management, tenancy, and financial restructuring of the royal estates were placed under the exclusive control of a newly formed permanent executive council. This council consisted of exactly 2 voting members, Prince William and Princess Anne. The document explicitly stripped the office of the Queen Consort of any traditional consultative role in these matters. For 2 decades, Camilla had used her position to slowly integrate her personal advisors into the estate committees, subtly shifting the balance of influence away from the direct heirs. By nightfall, that influence was officially entirely gone. The notice on the guardroom wall made it clear to every security officer, courtier, and administrator that any directive originating from Clarence House that did not carry William's explicit countersignature was to be ignored completely. The speed with which the government validated this shift was reflected in a quiet update from Whitehall. At 6:30, the official digital registry at the Home Office updated its structural charts for the royal household's budget allocations. The change was stark. The individual operational code for Camilla's London administrative team was completely deactivated. Her remaining staff were reassigned to a general administrative pool overseen directly by the Treasury Solicitor in Westminster. The government had completely dried up the financial channels that allowed her faction to operate independently. The ultimate confirmation of her total isolation arrived via a secure courier from the Prime Minister's office at 7 o'clock. The packet contained a brief, formal letter addressed directly to the Prince of Wales. The Prime Minister confirmed that the Cabinet Office had fully noted the new council layout and would recognize William's office as the sole authority for all future state communications during the King's recovery period. the political establishment had completely backed the direct bloodline, ensuring that any attempt by Camilla to spark a constitutional dispute would find absolutely no audience in Parliament. Inside Sandringham House, the practical execution of the verdict proceeded with total mechanical efficiency. A team of logistics movers arrived at the side courtyard, driving 2 unmarked dark vans. Under the silent watch of William's personal security team, they began loading several crates of administrative files, personal computers, and secure stationery units that had been cleared from the lower offices. Camilla's shadow network was not just being restricted, it was being physically removed from the premises, ensuring that no trace of her unauthorized treasury plans remained on the estate. The long-term reality of the verdict was most clearly visible in the enforcement of the residency clause. At 7:30, Princess Anne met with the estate's chief land agent in the small library. They spent less than 20 minutes reviewing the geographical boundaries and security arrangements for Birk Hall, the private crown property located deep within the Balmoral estate in Scotland. The mandate was already active. The estate agent received explicit orders to prepare the property for permanent year-round occupancy, ensuring that all logistics for Camilla's future household were transferred away from London before the spring. This physical relocation represented the absolute end of an era. By restricting her future residence to a remote estate hundreds of miles away from the capital, William and Anne had effectively cut her off from the daily social and political networks that drive palace appointments. She would no longer be present to influence the selection of private secretaries, the allocation of honors, or the daily management of the royal households. The monarchy had officially closed ranks, reclaiming its core administrative machinery for the direct bloodline. At 8 o'clock, Prince William walked down the long, silent portrait gallery toward the main entrance. He stopped for a brief moment to look out the tall glass windows toward the front gates. The lights of the security convoy were dim, reflecting quietly in the puddles on the gravel driveway. There were no further arguments, no last-minute appeals, and no dramatic outbursts. The confrontation had ended not with a dramatic public clash, but with the quiet, devastating application of constitutional and financial law. The Princess Royal joined him at the door, her hands clasped firmly in front of her dark woolen coat. She gave a single, brief nod as the head chauffeur brought William's car around to the steps. The alliance between the heir apparent and the king's sister had achieved exactly what it set out to do before the sun rose that morning. They had protected the traditional line of succession, neutralized an unauthorized financial power play, and firmly re-established the ancient hierarchy of the crown. William stepped out into the cold night air, his jacket zipped tight against the wind. He got into the driver's seat and turned on the engine, the headlights cutting a sharp path through the dark Norfolk countryside. The future of the institution was entirely secure. The old guard had successfully held the line at the door, and the new order was now a permanent matter of state record. The bloodline was back in absolute control of the House of Windsor, and the Queen Consort stood completely alone. The historic alliance between Prince William and Princess Anne has delivered a definitive, irreversible blow to the Queen Consort's faction. By joining forces, the direct bloodline of the royal family has completely reclaimed the core administrative machinery of the crown, leaving Queen Camilla thoroughly isolated and stripped of her former palace influence. This sweeping institutional purge has redrawn the boundaries of power inside the House of Windsor forever, proving that the old guard will stop at nothing to protect the traditional line of succession. What do you think this massive consolidation of power means for the immediate future of the British monarchy? With Camilla's inner circle systematically dismantled and her operational footprint restricted, can her faction ever recover from this historic verdict? Or is this the absolute end of her influence behind palace walls? Let us know your detailed thoughts and theories in the comments section below. If you want to keep tracking the raw truth, hidden betrayals, and high-stakes power struggles that shape the modern monarchy, make sure to hit the subscribe button right now. Do not forget to turn on all notifications so you never miss a single episode of this unfolding palace drama. We bring you the most compelling, deep dive inside stories from the heart of the royal family every single week. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in our next video.